That way I won't miss it. Okay.
Is that she?
No.
Hello, Elizabeth.
Go away. I might have trouble.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, good. Just making sure.
And what's your name?
My name is Reverend Dr. D, aka Richard Dugan.
How do you do? I'm Karen Lewis.
Well, Karen, nice to meet you. Start the recording here shortly as soon as Elizabeth comes back.
Okay.
Get my stopwatch ready. Okay.
I don't think it matters if you're not on there or not.
Whoops. There we go. Hello, Elizabeth.
I see her.
I see her too. Elizabeth, can you hear me? Not hearing you yet.
How's that?
There you are.
Okay. So Karen, is your son Mark with you?
Yes.
Okay.
Mark-
So Mark, can you put your mom on the video? Can you click the video thing on the bottom? Is it left-hand corner?
Yep, I see it.
Okay.
There it is.
Okay, there we go. That's better. Yeah. So the
Ah,
video's
look at
not
that smiling face.
yeah, the video's not going anywhere except Richard and I use it. That's basically it's not a public thing, but the
Sort of a
audio
backup. Mm-hmm.
So this is going to air Friday at 10, and then
Mhm.
it'll probably re-air.
10
think-
in the morning or 10 in the night?
No,
10 in the
10,
morning,
10
and then
in the
8
morning,
o'clock
and
at
then
night.
and then it'll re-air at night at 8.
Okay.
And Sunday at
and
11.
Sunday at 11. We hope anyway.
Down, Mark.
Yeah,
Oh.
and you can access this by just going to KZSB online if you want. But we're also Richard will send me a link. And Richard, I never got the link to last Friday.
Oh,
Well, I understand. I've sent it a couple of times, but it'll have to wait until tomorrow because I am sitting in our home right now with no power. I'm doing this on my phone, which
Oh,
won't change anything other than the way we're doing it. The video will still look the same, and I'll get that to you tomorrow. If we're hoping the power's going to come on here shortly, but we know how the electric company can be. Another one of those PSPS moronic things.
we've been in and out of power too.
Yeah, I mean it's
Matter of replacing telephone poles, paving roads. Oh my! At least
I
people
know.
are
I mean, I suppose we should be thankful that they're continuing to upgrade the infrastructure. Oh, that's great.
yes.
But there's got to be another way to do it so it doesn't inconvenience so many people for so long. It's just ridiculous.
I know.
Anyway, I'm all set at this end there, Elizabeth.
okay.
So let me first of all put on Do Not Disturb. And I've got my stopwatch there. And I will count you down. It's already video recording. All right, here we go. In 3, 2, 1.
Hello, Santa Barbara. It's your Chantress of everything valuable and beautiful, Elizabeth Stewart. And I have an artist with me today who's been around for a while and been creating for a while. And I'm thrilled to have her on the program because the Ojai Valley Museum will be doing a retrospective of her celebrated career. This is Karen K. Lewis with me. And Karen has got a career that has, well, it spans 7 decades. Since the 1950s, her paintings have graced galleries and private collections from Washington, D.C. to Soho, across California. And then the Ojai Valley Museum is also honoring her journey on a retrospective exhibition opening June 19th And so it's the title of the story that was in the Ojai Journal is Hurrah, 70 Years in the Making, from a wartime internment camp to Soho galleries and plein air trails in Ojai. Karen K. Lewis paints a life of resilience, imagination, and grace. And I have to tell you, it was so much fun to talk with Kathleen, who's
Oh,
Karen's press agent. I was talking with her about what a life you've led and how you got to Ojai and the long circuitous route. And I want to start the conversation by just a couple of questions, Karen. So, what time of day do you create? When do you go to the studio?
I try to get there right after lunch at noon. I'm not a morning person, but I can paint then after from 12 to 8 o'clock, especially in the summer. I have always done that, but I've had a busy life too. But lately, and the vast number of years, this has been my routine, and I paint almost every day of the week. And I do it in my studio, and I do it till the sun goes down and I have to get back in the house.
And then do
I have
you
I
write?
have a large barn. I have a large barn, and it's just a small walk to the barn. And we moved back to from New York to Ojai about in the 1990s, and that's when I built the studio. But I've been in different studios, including a basement and a top floor of a factory. And so, where do you want me to start?
Well, now that I have another question for you. Um, lots of artists. There's two. Well, let me start from here. So my son's father is an artist. I live with a professional photographer. I have many, many friends, 30 years of appraising art and antiques. I have many friends that are artists. And over the years, Richard and I, almost 20 years, every Friday, we talk with somebody in the creative community on this program. And it struck me, Karen, that there's two types methodologies of how artists work. One is that they allow the muse, let's say, the muse, the Greek muse, they allow the muse to just fall on their heads and be inspired whenever the muse comes. So the muse kind of drops down, sits on their head, on their shoulders, and they say, "Oh, I'm inspired. I've seen something, or I've felt something, or now I'm rushing to the studio." There's the
Yeah.
other type of artist I call the Hemingway style artist. The Hemingway style artist is I'll tell you, Ernest Hemingway, for example, he was in front of his typewriter after lunch every day, whether or not, and exact time every day, whether or not he was inspired, hungover, sick, nothing stopped him from and he had a theory that if I put my rear end in my chair, I can stare at a blank page forever if I want, or I can start to think and produce something. So there's two types of inspiration. One is you're sitting there, you have a set time, and you write or you paint from that time till you get up and have your meal. The other type is I just wait to get inspired. And if
Ah.
I get it, which type are you?
I like what Picasso called it, and he said that I hope when inspiration strikes, I'm in my studio working. And
Yeah, that's a yeah.
that's it. I mean, I get to the studio, as I say, in the last couple of years, I have been very regular. And I get there every day that I can. And I plan to be there every day. But there are days when are not going to be, you're going to doctors, or at least I am. And so that interferes with but I feel like Picasso. I hope when inspiration strikes that I'm in my studio.
Well put. Now,
But I am in my studio. That's what I do. I've had a long life and I've had a busy life. And start asking the questions. I'll answer all that I can remember.
right. So there was one series
Oh,
that I read about and I looked at the images from Kathleen sent me some pictures.
okay.
And I really liked winter chairs. I
Oh,
thought your series Winter Chairs was amazing. And so, because we're on radio, dear listener, I want to just take a few seconds to describe the beautiful series Winter Chairs that Karen K. Lewis has painted. So you can picture, I have in my garden your typical kind of curly Q wrought iron rocking chairs and garden chairs, you know,
yeah.
and they're the thin wrought iron. They're not the fat sort of New Orleans style, but it's the thin wrought iron, delicate sort of sometimes
Yes,
flowers, sometimes, but it's not ornate. It's very pretty. It's not all that popular today because everybody likes the more geometric look. But these are the garden chairs we grew up with.
yes.
So Karen took these garden chairs, and her series is garden chairs like this, but they're in the snow, and
Oh,
they
yeah.
look like
Oh,
they look like
they're
they
winter
look
chairs.
they're winter garden chairs. But I mean, nobody's sitting in them. They'd be freezing cold to the touch, and they look like people, or they look like remnants of people because you can see, in the summer they'd have a body in them, a person in them. In the winter, they're desolate and lonely looking out there in the snow. And in the background of these images that Karen painted, you will see the tracery of the chairs
Yes,
echoed by the bare leaves, the bare trees with no leaves behind in the background. So in the foreground there's snow, in the midground there's the chairs, and in one image there's a table and chairs, and in the background there's these winter trees. And I want to know the genesis of this series,
well,
Karen.
I, when I lived in New York, I began painting chairs because people threw things out on Tuesday night in every community. We lived in New Rochelle, and among the trash on regularly were beautiful chairs that people were getting rid of. And I would go around that early next morning if I was out, and I'd notice them, and I'd stop the car and take them home or to my studio or wherever I could. I would pick up thrown away chairs. And they were of a variety of chairs, but I didn't begin painting chairs. But this particular one was from a photograph because I was painting so many chairs that a friend of mine sent from her country home in upstate New York in the winter. And these were her chairs. No, no, no. These were the chairs from a person who was living up in Central California. And the snow, that's why you had the snow. I had other chairs galore because I lived in New York, so I painted winter chairs and I painted. I loved Charles Eames chairs. I was studying at UCLA back in the 50s, and Ames, they were there. They lived in Santa Monica, and they came and talked to us often, and they designed beautiful chairs, the Ames and his wife. And that's where I started with chairs. And I just painted them and painted them and painted them in every city I lived in except Dallas. When we lived in Dallas, I was raising and having children, and so I didn't get as much painting done, and I didn't get out as much. But I've just gone through many stages, and when I got back to California about 30 years ago, I had a big show at the museum in Santa Barbara here. And I mean, not in Santa Barbara. I was part of a Santa Barbara group. This was in Ventura, and I had at the Civic Center. I had all my chairs up, and the name of the show was "Please Be Seated." And I
How
had all
cool.
kinds of chairs, all of them.
I didn't know that the series was that vast. That's amazing. Oh, that was,
It's
we
fast, it
talked.
is.
That's very cool. How many pieces are in the series about chairs?
Oh gosh, maybe I'm not sure, maybe at least 7 or 8. I've
Okay.
sold a lot of them. I have had deck chairs that are green iron, and I've had them on decks, and I've had chairs that are white plastic, tons of those. And then when I traveled abroad occasionally, I would find not just white ones, but I pink ones and green ones and just all over the world. But I
Well,
only got a white ones.
I would love to see the pink chairs. Richard's giving us this hand signal that we got to go to quick break, Karen. When we get back, I want to ask you about your years at Chouinard and talk to you a little bit about your years at the Art Institute, who you were inspired by, who your teachers were, and I
Okay.
want to tell you why I'm interested in knowing this also, because I have a client I'm actually researching his early days at the Art Center LA Art Center
Oh,
school. And
yes,
so I'm
yes, it's a course.
in the 30s and the 40s, and all the instrumental artists that were around the Art Center school in Los Angeles at the time. So don't turn that down. Back in a
Okay.
minute with Karen K. Lewis.
In 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back. It's Elizabeth Stewart, and I'm celebrating the art of Karen K. Lewis, 7 decades of making art. I believe, are you okay with me saying you're in what decade are you in right now, Karen?
I'm 92 and I'm going to be 93 in August, this coming
In
August.
what day in August?
22.
Okay, so you're just on the Virgo Leo cusp then.
Yes, I am.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I'm a 2025 August gal.
Are
So
you? Oh my
yeah.
goodness. I think I
So
have a granddaughter that has that birthday too. She's in New York. She's still in the state. She's one of wait, ask me, let me start with the fact that I began painting when I was a young woman, a young girl. I drew my own paper dolls after a while. And that was because my mother wouldn't let me go to dinner until I had cleaned up my room playing with dolls. And so that I just switched to paper dolls and I could just design clothes for them and draw for them and put them in a box as soon as dinner. Mother said dinner, I was there. But actually, when I was at UCLA, after the war, I thought I would like to be a fashion designer or illustrator. Now this is the 50s, and people were still hired to do drawings for newspapers for fashion. And I was I thought I was going to do that. And then I got to UCLA and I found I had to take a lot of business courses if I wanted to be that. And I said, no, I don't want to do business courses. I'll take some ed courses and become a teacher. But I basically loved all my artists. I loved my teachers. It was the time of Anita Delano and Jan Stussy and a little bit of what's his name, Fanny Bryce's son. He was there. He came late. I didn't really have a lot. William Bryce was a big deal there, and I just I got so much out of UCLA, and I then got married, went to DC, got a job as a clerk on the Hill, and I started to take lessons again with a wonderful artist at American University. I never stopped taking classes or finding a way to study with somebody different. And I did that all my life. In fact, after every child, I made my husband promise that I could have a night studying art with something or other. And that's how I got into portrait painting. And that's how I got into, studied with Jacob Kanan in Washington, D.C. I had and then when we moved to New York, I found the White Plains Center in New York and they had a printmaker and I studied printmaking and I kept going with printmaking and I just kept going and because there always was something new to learn. And I just loved studying with great artists and I had a lot of them and they were big, all big and different influence on me. My big time that I really loved was when I had taught for about 10 years in New York. And then I got involved with a women's group in Soho. And it was the time of the Keith Haring and Basquiat, and all these wonderful artists. And I joined a women's caucus group, and I started working on my master's. And I think that's when I really got into chairs also. And then I was doing portraits in my kitchen when I was having children. I mean, I had the playpen there and the easel there. And so I've been working at it for a long time. And I still am working at it. Last year I did tons of paintings. So
So I wanted to ask you about that. Because you're talking about the early 80s, and you're talking.
that was Manhattan and New York and the gallery, Pindar Gallery.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you about. So, here you're 92 going on 93 in a couple of
Yeah.
weeks, and
Yep.
you must have experienced what a lot of, people. Now my mom is 2 years older than you.
Oh, wow.
She's still around,
Oh, good.
and she tells me, well, she was in music, so she was in conducting.
Ah, yeah.
And so she was the first female graduate of Juilliard in conducting. And she used to say,
Wow. That's
it's,
wonderful.
yeah, she's
Yeah.
super talented. She used to say it's not an equal world, as far as the men and the women in the arts. It's just not equal.
Oh, it
And
wasn't. And that was the time of the women's movement in the 80s. And
that's where I wanted to go with this.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. And there was Audrey Flack was really big then. She was a more realistic artist than was the time. It was the beginning of, well, the modern art movement really began in the 20s more with and the 30s and then by the 40s after the war, uh, it was totally everything changed. And we had Pollock and we had uh, what's his name? My brain is going. Anyway, so it just was it was the best time to be in New York for women. And we had the Guerrilla Girls and all the gals that involved in showing, and it was great. It was just great. I loved that time.
So did you find that it was that's part of the impetus behind, I know you were co-founder of the Pindar Gallery.
Well,
Um,
yes, we were not living in New York. We were living in the suburbs, and we felt that we were just as good as everybody else. We were showing in Westchester and Mamaroneck and everything. And then and about 10 of women that were in showing with me in Westchester got the idea that we should start our own gallery and have our representation in New York too. So that was what got us going. And at the time, also in Soho were the Guerrilla Girls, and they were in the Air Gallery mostly, and the Soho 20 Gallery. And we thought of somebody thought up the name of the Greek poet Pindar.
yeah,
So
I was going to ask about that.
we're named,
Yes.
we called ourselves the Pindar Gallery. I guess
So
it was,
yeah, wanted
yeah,
to know where that name came from. And
yeah.
how long was the gallery up and running?
Well, it was up and running 10 years and then it became a spaghetti factory. And at the time, I had been teaching at I had finished my elementary school, my no, I had was teaching high school art, and then I became an adjunct professor at the College of New Rochelle. And that was great because I could continue. They would pay me with summer classes in printmaking so I could use the press all summer. And it worked out beautifully. And my husband was transferred to Los Angeles in 1990. And I went with him because I was born in Glendale and raised in Manila and back to, the UCLA High School, John Marshall High School. And that's when you said something about Chenard's, or didn't you
I
some
did. I wanted to know because you were still in high school when you joined them.
Yes, well, what happened then, the LA banks were offering scholarships, and Chenard's was offering two students from each high school were given a course, a semester at Chenard's on Saturdays, of course. But it was great. It was the first time I actually used oils, because in high school you don't use oil-based paints, or you didn't then. You have water-based paints. It was casein or something like that. And we dug out one. We're going to put one of those in the show. That's the show's going to actually open up a week from tomorrow, and it's
So,
going to be up, and it's right here in Ojai, and it's in town. They are that I think it's going to be kind of interesting. I'm not in charge of putting it up. I'm going to be the one that's got the big surprise coming. So see what they're doing and what they used and what they got. One of the paintings that we unearthed and ended up for 30 years in the Ventura Museum collection. And we got that out, and I just loved seeing it again. I go, oh my God, that's pretty good.
so I want to bring you back to 1937.
Okay.
And Kathleen and I were talking about, by the way, Kathleen is Karen's press agent who I've known for years. And we were
Oh,
talking about,
yeah, she's wonderful.
yes, we were talking about World War II
Oh,
uh,
yeah.
and and Karen's internment years with her parents. And if you're not uncomfortable about it, I'd love to
Oh,
hear
I'm not
more.
uncomfortable. My mother used to talk when we came back. We were repatriated back to the States. Well, I shouldn't start when the war is over. Yes, my father took a job in Manila in 1937, and because it was the Depression, you remember, and he had lost a whole bunch of people came down from Montana in the 20s. From Augusta, Montana, and they moved to Glendale, and my family was among them. And then my dad during the Depression, he lost his build business. He had a gas station, and he had a partner who absconded, and suddenly he didn't have a job. But he had a friend from Montana who was working for Manila Motors in Manila as an accountant, and he said, "I'm moving up. You can come and have my job." So anyway, we ended up in sailing to Manila in March of 1937. And then a few years later, my dad became an accountant at the mining up in Baguio. We moved to Baguio, which is the northern capital of Manila, and is up in the mountains and much, much cooler. And they needed, when there's gold mines up there. And that's where we were on December 8th when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. And the Japanese very quickly were on the way. MacArthur he sort of didn't figure that they would be ready to bomb us so soon. And suddenly by January of that year, we were lining up and being put in an internment camp. We had gone back down to Manila to be safe, but Manila had been declared an open city, and the Japanese were bombing Manila at the time, and people were leaving Manila and going to Manila. So we ended up living with some friends from Manila until the Japanese knocked on the door in January, early January, and they were there, and we were interned in Santa Tomas internment camp for 3 years and a month.
Okay, so I want to just fill people in on what Karen's just said that this is the early years of the war. So 1937.
The war started. They bombed Pearl Harbor was 41, late
Yeah,
41.
yeah. Her family moved to Manila due to the Depression, 37. The war started after the bombing of Pearl Harbor in 1941 for us and for the U.S. By 1942, the Allied civilian population of Manila, the internment started at that time. And Karen, who I'm speaking to, her mom and dad were sent to a Dominican-run school, Santo Tomas University, which was the internment camp for the Allied civilians. And she was there for 3 years. And there's some interesting Kathleen shared with me some interesting photographs of you and your mom. And do you
Yeah.
remember much about it? Do you remember much about
Oh,
it?
yeah, I was 9 when we were interned. I had had my 9th birthday, and then when we were liberated, I was 12 and a half, and I became 13, and I started school. I went into 8th grade in LA. Uh, we had teachers intern too. So in the beginning, when the Japanese, with the beginning of the war, when the Japanese were capturing everything in the Pacific, they were we had a nice civilian commandant who had actually been in the States. And this all ended after a year when the Japanese were starting to lose. And suddenly the Americans were more of a presence and starting to win, and the war was turning. And that's when we really suffered. We didn't have food. The Japanese weren't. We lost our commandant and had a military commandant, and life was not as nice, and we all were starving. And they realized that by the end of the year, that MacArthur was afraid that they'd all be killing us because they didn't want hostages and didn't want. So life was not bad at the beginning, because my mother could send me out to a boarding school because the propaganda was that we're being so nice to our prisoners, we're letting them have, go out to schools to have better food and enrichment, blah, blah, blah. That ended very quickly.
I see.
That wasn't for the last 2.5 years were not so good.
So I just wanted to say that we have to go to quick break, but how interesting that you lived through that. And just to finalize the story, so on the day that you all were liberated, that would be February 7th, 1945.
It's February 3rd in Santa Tomas.
February 3rd, okay.
Yeah.
So shortly after that, the Japanese bombed you all.
No, they were bombing. They were bombing it in 41 after Pearl Harbor. Though it had been declared MacArthur did not want the city destroyed because he was planning to get back to it. But they bombed. They did, and the Battle of Manila was horrible. We were being liberated. They were coming. They came from up. They landed at Lanagayan and they made a run down to Cabanatuan and then to Santa Tomas and finally to the camp that was south. They had taken out. Name of it. Mark, where are you? Anyway, it just was the Battle of Manila has been written about now by James. Oh, I need more.
I think it's Michener, isn't it?
Yes, not
Yeah.
James. Oh well, I'll my mind is losing names. I'll think of it in a minute. He wrote Rampage, and that
It's
was
not it's not James Michener.
no, not
No, okay.
James. It's James. Well, I told Mark. Anyway, I'll get him back. You gotta
That's
stay
okay.
here because of my vocabulary is escaping me. What is James' last name? James who wrote Rampage. Scott. James Scott wrote Rampage, and it's terrible. It's sad. Many of my parents' friends were killed by Japanese. They were trying to destroy the civilians of Manila before the Americans could come and free them. It was a very horrible, destructive war. And now I'm reading a book by what's his name now? Horn. Who Horn? Oh, Mark, there's a Jonathan Horn, something, is it written a new book called The Generals? The Two Generals? Oh, geez, it's right over the table in the living room. MacArthur and Wayne, well, I knew that. MacArthur and Wainwright. It's another story that's so well written, you might enjoy it. It's about the time beginning before the war, through the war, and after the war that Wainwright and MacArthur, who had they weren't friends at the end. Because MacArthur, yeah, we're getting off my subject too hard. We need to have a
Well,
whole.
that's okay. Richard's giving us a sign we got to go to quick break, and so we'll reconfigure after the break.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I have a couple more questions for you before
Okay,
we have to.
okay.
Yeah, okay. Let's go to quick break, Richard.
Okay.
All right, here we go. And you have basically about 15 minutes still. So this will be the final segment, but you got a long segment here in 3, 2, 1. You're live.
Welcome back. This is Karen K. Lewis. We're speaking with Karen because she is having a wonderful show, 7 decades of her artwork, a retrospective of her celebrated career at the Ojai Valley Museum, June 19th to August the 3rd. Opening reception is June 20th from 5 to 7 p.m. And you'll be able to see, well, I hope they're going to hang some of your chairs because I want to go
Oh,
see
there's one.
those.
Yes, they are. They're going to have winter chairs in that you like, and I don't know what others. I'm afraid they're not putting all my chairs in, but and during the show, the artists who in town are having their second week of Arbolada artists open. And so I'll have all those, I'll pull out chair paintings for that and I'll keep them in my studio, my barn. And but I don't think there's a room for all the chairs that I have done that I still have in our museum. I have no idea what's going in it, except that they're going to try to get a selection of all my 7 decades of output.
That's marvelous. And so I want to bring us back to an article that Ojai Quarterly contributing editor Mark Lewis uh, wrote an article called "An Interrupted Life." And Mark is your son.
Yes.
This is from a longer memoir that you wrote for the book "Interrupted Lives: Four Women's
Oh,
Stories of
yes,
Inter."
yes.
Talk,
Yeah.
talk to me about that.
Well, back in, we were going to go to Manila as a reunion in 95 because it was the 50th anniversary of the liberation, which had been in 45. So this was 55, and we all went to Manila. But the woman who was in the Ken Burns, Jean Sasha Weinsheimer, was my friend. We grew up together, and our families were friends. And we both decided that we would write our stories, and I had a friend in college who was very interested, and Lily Nova, and she asked me to please gather war stories of women. And I gathered a whole bunch of them, but what happened is that suddenly we were going to Manila, and suddenly I got four friends I found, and Margaret Sams was one of them, to write our 4 stories, and we got it published and called the book Interrupted Lives, and that we wanted to give to the Santo Tomas University Library, and we did. So that's why that was written in a hurry. We didn't do all the war stories of Europe and the Pacific. We only got that book done, 4 stories, and the 4 of us it's our personal story. And I wrote my life in Santa Tomas.
And I read
I
here
have a
that there
copy,
were,
I could give it to you.
oh, that would be fun. There were how many I think there was 3,000 or so
Yes, there
internees.
were 3,000, and as they went to 4,000, they started removing younger men and women and a lot of nuns to the place that down Billabid, not Billabid. Again, Mark is gone. Uh, but there's another, they took about 1,000 or more out to build and clean up an area south of the Manila Bay, where and I just can't think of the name of that camp right now. And maybe Mark will come in again.
Oh, that's okay. That's all right. That just the idea that there
But
was three.
it was the leftover. It was getting too crowded, and so they moved about 1,000 people out, and that was liberated at the after. But the battle again, the Battle of Manila was going on through all of this liberation. And Mark, what is the name of the? Please stay here. The camp that everybody went to, Sister Marie Bernard went to. um, Everyone, the one that was liberated on the
It
20th.
was where the country club was that you know, Laguna,
No, it's not Baguio.
no, the country, aren't you supposed to be talking about art?
And well, I just don't have, I'm,
Can I ask a question about your
Yeah.
kind of go redirect on this, Karen, which is that I want to know it's interesting the article in Ojai Quarterly that was written not too long ago that is called My Last Hurrah, 70 Years in the Making, the show that is about to be opened on June 19th of your work.
Oh, yeah.
You recall in that article that you talk about meeting your husband and how, you know, you kind of began as friends and also both very creative individuals. And I wanted you to reflect on him and your feelings about how he influenced your career. I'll put it that way. Can you tell me more?
Uh, I knew his brother in high school. And so when I was leaving John Marshall and going uh, to UCLA, Dale Lewis said, well, look up my brother. I said, sure. And I never did, except that and when I was a senior, or I was a junior, and my roommate at the time just didn't like the guy I was dating. And she thought I was too good for him. And she was dating a guy who was a good friend of my future husband's. And she said, Karen, I'd like to introduce you to a guy named Craig Lewis. I think you'd like him. And I said, I know that name. I was supposed to look him up 3 years ago. Sure, I'll go out with him. And I did, and I kind of liked him. So, and he had just returned from the service. He was not accepted because of his asthma, and he was working here for he was living, he was working, and and he wanted to be a reporter, and he was going on his way to New York. And we went out and we liked each other. And in no time at all, the guys from Vietnam, was it Vietnam? Korea were coming home. And he had joined another one who was being discharged in Washington, D.C., and another guy went to work with, and they left. So I spent another year and a half exchanging letters. And then he came home for Christmas and he proposed, and I said yes.
And that's the end of the story.
Right. I
Well,
mean,
my question though, you didn't actually answer, although this is super interesting, but how did he influence your career?
Well, he was a journalist and he never, he encouraged it. When I wanted to take a class, I took a class. He never said, no, you have to stay home. You have to have another child. No, no, he never did that. I kind of could call my shots and decide that I needed to take a class or I'd love to have another child or what. He didn't tell me what to do, but he was very influential and I loved his friends and I loved being the reporter and he got me a job on the Hill and I was a clerk for Senator Kuechel of California. And I saw more Californians. I could write Thomas H. Kuechel on cards and hand them out. It was wonderful. He influenced me because he was such a nice guy and so smart and so bright and had great jobs as reporters. And then he went on to, we moved to New York because you scratch a journalist and you'll find a budding PR guy. And we ended up on Madison Avenue.
So I want to, in the final minutes that we have, I want to ask you, there's a work that I'm looking at called Inner Peace of yours. And
Oh,
it is, yeah, and
so
and my question is, so, you can paint realism, that's clear.
it's a print.
And
I do
how,
prints.
so yeah, how did we transition to abstraction there?
Well, it's a print. It's etching or a monoprint. When I moved to New York, there was a great printmaker, and I began to learned how to print non lithographs, etchings, all kinds. I really love printmaking. It's work on paper with oil-based ink. And a lot of, as I did etchings, I did monoprints, I did all kinds of things. And I just loved it as an alternative to painting the oils. But I still used oil ink and I used paper. But when you have etchings and printmaking and lithographs and you're working with a stone or a plate or a press, you're always having to work with a press because you're not really drawing, you're drawing on a copper plate and biting it in acid, and then you're filling it with ink, and then you're printing it on paper. It's much more complicated. I just sold my press last year.
Now, my question is kind of more direct, which is how do you transition between realism and abstraction?
I don't know. I mean, you just do it because you've got the space, you've got the idea, and it's a different medium. So you're not really using color and brush. You're using pencil, not pencil, but a stylus to dig in to draw into a metal plate. So you would have, I found that it was much more difficult and bothersome to do all that, but the results were more abstract and more unreal. It was messier. That's what it was. You could be messy and not have perfect lines and perfect drawings. You could be much more creative and much looser. It just lent itself to this kind of it's like throwing paint or rubbing it on a plate, printing the plate, then doing another plate and putting it on top of that plate and printing, layering. And that's what you see with Inner Peace, because I had been in Europe and I had been taking I did a lot of printmaking classes in Venice and in Italy also throughout my life. And that was part of coming home. And there was an artist here in town who loved doves, and she wanted to do a show with everybody doing doves. And so I thought, and I put in this some photographs and some drawings and sketches that I had found in the Siena Cathedral in with all the babies that Herod had killed, and there's a whole bunch of those on the floor of the cathedral, in Siena. And I just used a lot of stuff from places in Italy, cathedrals and war and stuff. And that's what I did. I borrowed
Okay.
from Italy.
So I'm gonna the final minute there. I have a question for you, and it'll be with a single answer from you. Which Karen is the question is. So my son's father is an artist. He's a watercolorist, and he loves hanging his work in his house.
Oh, yes, of course.
Now I have another friend who's an artist who hates hanging her work in her house because she looks at it and then says it's not finished or I didn't do this. Da, da, da. Which one are you?
Both.
Both.
I hang in my house, I hang in my studio, I sell when I can. I have a bunch of flowers that a woman, a florist, has borrowed to have in her new store, and she'll sell them for me. I have done many flowers too, and I do them more casually. They're not, really looking, and I'm not caring if it's perfect. And so I let it go. And when you let it go, and I sort of do when I'm printmaking, which is very strange because it's such a complicated thing to do. And but I guess I get even with the effort by being casual and sloppy.
And then I have a final question. Then we have to say goodbye. But I'm super excited for the opening, which is going to be June the 19th at the Ojai Valley
Well, that's
Museum.
not the reception, but it will be all hung by then. And
It'll
that
be all hung.
the
Yeah,
next afternoon is the reception.
reception June 20th from 5 to 7.
Yeah.
And so one final question. Richard, how much time do we have?
He said 5. He did 5.
Oh, very small. Okay. So can you give me one sentence on this, Karen, which is the question is, since you taught art for many years, how do you recognize talent?
Well, I think these days it seems like every single teenager is talented. I don't know, or maybe it's AI. But things have changed, and the talent is. Um, how do I recognize talent? I just know it. I feel it. I see it. It's sort of a clarity. There's a resolution. There's maybe a theme that's lovely colors that are maybe mixed, every single one. Um, it's just a sort of there's sort of a professional kind of approach that's not overdone, but it's finished. And I would say
That
that,
makes a lot of sense. I know what you're saying when you say overdone. As a matter of fact, let's see if this makes you laugh. So Michael Drury, who is a teacher of art at the Santa Barbara City College, he's been teaching for 45 years. And Michael, I know him socially, and he also came on the show. And I said, Michael, you've been teaching for 45 years. How do you know when a student's painting is finished? Because that's a big challenge. I'm
yeah,
finished, right?
yeah.
He said, Elizabeth, I know when painting's finished right before I start to see the brown potato in the sky. Meaning before the oils get mushed into just an amorphous color brownish, then
Uh,
it's overworked and it's not, it's overfinished.
yeah.
And so he says, right before I see the brown potato in the sky, I know a work is finished.
Uh,
Yeah. And
yeah.
I want to give another shout out to your show. A wonderful achievement. And I thank you so much for being on the air 7 decades. It's called The Art of Karen K. Lewis, a retrospective of her celebrated career. I'm talking with Karen today, who's on the verge of her 93rd birthday. So this is a show that's covering 7 decades of
Yeah.
her paintings. That's amazing. And it's at the Ojai Valley Museum. It's the June 19th to the August 3rd, and the opening reception is June 20th, 5 to 7. And if you're interested, you might find out more if you go onto the website, the Ojai Valley Museum website, and you can kind of see a little bit. There's a couple pieces of Karen's up there, and you can kind of see a little bit of the kind of treat you'll be in for if you join all of us at that show at the Ojai Valley Museum. And Karen, thank you very much, and congratulations, a wonderful achievement.
Thank
And to
you.
be
I have a
shown in,
website too.
sorry, say again?
You can go to my website too.
Yeah, okay, good. All right. So now we know also we can go to Karen K. Lewis to her website and see some of her work. And just a thought. Are any of the works going to be for sale?
Oh, yes, yes, not the ones we borrowed back from, that are owned by other people.
Right.
But those 5 or 6 are not for sale, but everything else is.
Okay, very good. Okay, thank you. Now
And
we know we can go to
my
Karen K. Lewis.
website is karenklewis.art.com.
I did look at that. Yes, KarenKLewisArt.com. And thank you very much, Karen, for being with us. And Richard, thank you for fitting us in. And we're looking forward to meeting you in person at the show at the museum. Thank you, Karen.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth. Hope to see
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Okay. Excellent. So thank you, Karen. That's wonderful. And it's really fun because we got a sense of who you are, and I know that I heard Mark